Welcome to the YouTube channel Shamina Sarfuddin. This video is going to emphasize on types of clinical research. So myself Shamina Sarfuddin, Head and Associate Professor from the Department of Biochemistry, Ratnavil Subramaniam College of Arts and Science, Coimbatore, India. Let's go into the topic. What are the different types of clinical research? Before getting into that, clinical research is a branch of healthcare science that determines the safety and effectiveness, that is, the efficacy of the medications, devices, diagnostic products, and also treatments which are intended for the human use. They might be used for the prevention, treatment, diagnosis, or for relieving symptoms of a particular disease. Clinical research is different from clinical practice. In clinical practice, we establish the treatments that are being used, while in the case of clinical research, evidence is being collected for establishment of a treatment. There are different types of clinical research. The types of used depending on what the researchers are studying. Some of the different kinds of clinical research are treatment research, prevention research, diagnostic research, screening research, quality of life research, genetic studies, and also epidemiological studies. Different types of clinical research are used depending on what the researchers are studying. The first one, the treatment research. Treatment research generally involves an intervention such as medication, psychotherapy, new devices, or new approaches to the surgery or radiation therapy that we use in the diagnostic part. The second one, the prevention research. This research looks for the better ways to prevent the disorders from developing or returning back. The different kinds of prevention research may study medicines, vitamins, vaccines, minerals, or lifestyle changes. Looking at the diagnostic research, it mainly refers to the practice of looking for better ways to identify a particular disorder or condition. Next is screening research. It mainly aims to find the best ways to detect certain disorders or health conditions. The quality of life research explores the ways to improve the comfort and the quality of life for individuals with a chronic illness. Next, looking into the genetic studies. The genetic studies aim to improve the production of disorders by mainly identifying and also understanding how the genes and illness may be related together. Research in this area may explore many ways in which a person's gene make him or her more or less likely to develop a disorder. This may lead to the development of tailor-made treatments based on a patient's genetic makeup. Next is the epidemiological studies. It mainly seeks to identify the patterns, causes, and also control of disorders in a group of people. An important note that had to be taken is some clinical research is outpatient. It means that the participants do not stay overnight at the hospital. Some, some are inpatient. It means that the participants that undergo the clinical research, have need to stay for at least one night in the hospital or the so-called research center. So it is the need to ask the researchers, what does their clinical research study actually requires? So depending on the types of clinical research, the research diagnosis takes place. Phases of clinical trials. The phases of clinical trials is mainly observed when the clinical research is used to evaluate the medications and about the devices. Clinical trials are a kind of clinical research. It is being designed to evaluate and also to test the new interventions such as psychotherapy or medications. Clinical trials are often conducted in four different phases. The trials of each phase have a different purpose, and it mainly helps the scientist to answer many different questions related to the research area. The four different phases of clinical trials are phase 1 trial, phase 2 trial, phase 3 trial, and the phase 4 trials. Looking at the phase 1. Here in the phase 1 trials, the researchers test an experimental drug or treatment in a small group of people for the first time. So the first time the people are coming in contact of a particular medicine. So the researchers, after diagnosing or giving the drug to the patients, they start to evaluate the treatment safety, how whether they are causing any side effects or is there any lethal dosage. Then they are in a need to determine a safe dosage range pertaining to the age groups, whether they are kids or adults or old people. According to that, they fix the dosage limit of a particular drug. And also, they also help in identifying whether that particular drug has a possibility of developing side effects. So these are the observations that are being formed during the phase 1 trials. Entering into the phase 2 trials. In the phase 2 trials, the experimental drug or the treatment is being given to a larger group of people to see if it is effective more and further evaluate its safety. Because in phase 1, we select a small group that is not enough to conclude the safety of the drug, and thereby phase 2 trials are being run in order to find whether the efficacy of the drug is good enough and also it is safe when it is being tested in many people. Then looking at the phase 3 trials, the experimental study drug or treatment is now given to a large group of people. Now the researchers start to confirm its effectiveness, how effective the drug is. They started monitoring the side effects and also they compare it to commonly used treatments and they start to collect the information that will allow the experimental drug or the treatment that can be used for safety. Getting into the phase 4 trials, it is mainly the post-marketing studies that are being conducted after a treatment if it has been approved by FDA. It also provides additional information, including the treatment or the drug risk, its benefits, and the best use. These are all come under the phase 4 trials. And these are very important phases to determine the clinical research. Examples of other kind of clinical research. Many people believe that all clinical research involves testing of new medications or devices. But we need to understand this is not true. However, some studies do not involve testing medications, and also a person's regular medications may not be need to be changed. Thereby, healthy volunteers are also needed so that the researchers can compare their results to the result of the people with the illness that is being studied. For example, if you are diagnosing on diabetic, if they want to find a curative for it, so there should be two sources. The first one should be a healthy adult, and the second one where the diabetes has been induced, and thereby the drug that has been administered has to be deducted, and that's why we need to compare the results of both the healthy individual as well as the person with that particular illness. The examples of other kinds of research mainly include a long-term study that involves psychological tests or even brain scans, which has been adopted to understand the neurophysical activity. A genetic study that involves the blood test, but at times there won't be any change in the medication. A study of family history, which mainly involves talking to the family members to learn about the people's medical need and history, thereby understanding whether the family is being prone to such a disease or not. And these sort of things will help you to understand the clinical research in a very detailed and in the depth way. Reasons for conducting clinical studies. In general, the clinical studies are being designed to add to the medical knowledge that is being related to the treatment, diagnosis, prevention of disease or the conditions. Some common reasons for conducting the clinical studies mainly include evaluating one or more interventions. For example, the drugs, medical devices, approaches to surgery or radiation therapy for treating a disease, syndrome, or some conditions. The clinical research will help us to find the ways to prevent the initial development or reoccurrence of a disease or condition. This might include the finding of medicines, vaccines, lifestyle changes among these approaches. Evaluating one or more interventions aimed at identifying or diagnosing a particular disease or a disease condition. The clinical research also helps us to examine the methods that are being used for identifying a condition or the risk factor for that particular condition for which the patient faces. The clinical research will help us to explore and measure the ways to improve the comfort and quality of the life through supportive care of the people, even when there is a chronic illness. And thereby, these reasons will give a valid reason for conducting the clinical study and finding a solution via the clinical research. Looking into the participations in clinical studies. A clinical study is being conducted according to the research plan, which we commonly call it as protocol. So before designing the clinical research, it is the must the researcher should design a protocol. The protocol is being designed in order to answer specific research questions, and the protocol is mainly meant for safeguarding the health of the participants. It contains the following information. Number 1, the reasons for conducting the study. Number 2, who may participate in the study, that is the eligibility criteria. Number 3, the number of participants that are being needed for a particular study. Number 4, the schedule of the test, the procedures that they adopt, the drugs and their dosage that we use. Number 5, the length or the period of the study that a researcher is going to conduct the clinical research. Number 6, what are the information that will be gathered about the participants? Of understanding these, participation in clinical research or clinical studies begins. Now, let us see who can participate in a clinical study. Clinical studies have standards outlines, that is to mean who are the participant who can participate in it. The standards are called eligibility criteria and are being listed very clearly in the protocol. Some research studies, they seek the participants who have the illness or conditions that will be studied. The other studies are looking for healthy participants, and some studies are limited to predetermined group of people who are being asked by the researchers to enroll themselves for the clinical study. So the eligibility is the more important thing. So the factors that allow someone to participate in a clinical study are usually called as inclusion criteria. And the factors that disqualify someone from participating into the clinical research are called as exclusion criteria. So eligibility solely depends upon whether it is inclusion or exclusion. They are based on characteristics such as age, gender, the type and the stage of disease, and if there is any previous treatment history for the patient, and other medical conditions what they are into it. So these eligibility will solely determine the detailedness whether the patient is eligible to undergo the clinical diagnosis or not. So looking into how are the participants protected. So because it's a need of the clinical researcher to safeguard the life of a participant. So we have an informed consent, which means a process used by the researcher to provide the potential and enrolled participant with the information about a clinical study. The information mainly helps the people to decide whether they want to enroll or they need to continue to participate in that study. So the informed consent process is indeed help the participant to protect themselves and also provide enough information for a person to understand what are the risks associated with the clinical research, the potential benefits, and the alternatives to the study. Sometimes the informed consent document may say it might involve the process which involve requirement details, verbal instruction, question and answer sessions, and activities to measure the participant understanding. So in general, a person must sign an informed consent document before joining a study to show that whether he or she was given information on the risk, potential benefits, and the alternatives that he or she understands. Signing the document and providing the consent is not a contract. Participants may withdraw from the study at any time, even if the study is not over. The participant has the right to do it. See, we can also ask some questions over there to ask a healthcare provider or the researcher about participating in a clinical research. Looking into the institutional review boards. Each federal supported or conducted clinical study and each study of a drug about the biological product or the medical device that are being regulated by the FDA must be reviewed, approved, and monitored by the Institutional Review Board, which we call it as IRB. An IRB is made up of doctors, researchers, members of the community. The main role of IRB is to make sure that the study is ethical and that the rights and welfare of the participants are being protected. This might include making the research risk are being minimized and reasonable in relation to any potential benefits among the responsibilities. So next is the relationship to usual healthcare. Typically, participants continue to see their usual healthcare providers while enrolled in a clinical study. While most clinical studies provide participants with medical products or intervention related to the illness or condition that is being studied, they do not provide extended or complete health care. So now looking into the consideration for participation. So participating in a clinical study contribute to medical knowledge. The results of these studies may make a difference in the care of the future patients by providing them the information about the benefits, about the risk of therapeutic, preventive, or diagnostic products or interventions. Clinical trials, they provide the basics of the development and marketing of new drugs, biological products, and medical devices. Sometimes the safety and effectiveness of the experimental approach may not be fully known at the time of the trial. So some trials may provide participants with the prospect of receiving the direct medical benefits, which others they may not. So most of the trials involve some risk of harm or injury to the participant, which might not be greater than the risk related to the routine medical care or the disease progression. So many trials require participants to undergo the additional procedures, tests and assessments based on the study protocol. So the requirements will be described in the informed consent document so that we need to understand very clearly. A potential participant should also discuss the issues with members of the research team and with her usual healthcare provider. So that these are the things that need to be very much cared during the conduct of clinical research, whatever clinical research type it might be. Questions that are specific to the clinical trials. Anyone who is interested in participating in a clinical trial or the clinical study should know as much as possible about the study, and he or she should be comfortable about the clinical research. The team questions about the study, the related procedures, and also any expenses. The questions that will be helpful during a discussion could be could be provided in the informed consent document. The questions that have been specific to the clinical trials are: number one, what is being studied? So there should be a description to say what is being studied about. Number two, why do researchers believe the intervention being tested might be effective? Why might it not be effective? Has it been tested before? So this lies the second important thing. I repeat, why do researchers believe the intervention being tested might be effective, and why it might not be effective? And another thing, have it been tested before? So this is the second slot. The third slot of question is, what are the possible interventions that might receive during the trial? So a patient should be very much clear about the intervention that might occur during the clinical trial. Number four, how will be determined which intervention I receive? For example, by chance, if there is any interventions I could face during the clinical trial, what could be the chance of getting that? And number five, who will know which interaction I received during the trial? Will I know, or will members of the research team know? This is a very important thing that we need to look into. Whether I am going to receive all the things, or will my researcher will alone know what is happening within me? That is also important. And number six, how do the possible risks occur, the side effects, and the benefits of the trial compared with those of the current treatment that is available in the market? Number seven, what will I have to do? What are the basic things I need to do? A researcher should answer the participant. Next is, what tests and procedures are being involved in conducting the research? That has to be evident, clear. The protocol should be clear. And next is, how often will I have to visit the hospital or a clinic when I am under the clinical trial? Is it necessary for me to go to the research center or the hospital daily? It should be a visit being regular, or at what particular interval should I visit it? There should be clarity in it. Next one is, will hospitalization be required? This is a very important thing. The patient should be very clear whether he or she should be hospitalized or not. And next is, how long will the study last? The period, as I said earlier, the period of study is very important. It should not be ever ending, and we cannot say it should be infinite also. There should be some time length to say a particular time has been determined. And who will pay for my participation? Who is going to pay? Whether it is by the agency, or one who does the clinical research, or which particular board? Will I be reimbursed for other expenses? If I do some expenses, if I personally does it, will I be reimbursed for those things? That should also be made clear. And next is, what type of long-term follow-up care is part of this trial? So what are the care I should have taken up? If I benefit from the intervention, will I be allowed to continue receiving it after the trial ends? That is another important question. Will I be allowed if I want to intervene in it? Will results of the study be provided to me? Yeah, because I'm more into the concern of the research, right? So if I am a patient, I'll be very eager to understand what will be the result. And who will oversee my medical care when I am participating in my trial? Who are the diagnostic person who will take care of my health? Day one, I'm like that, and day two, I'm facing some side effects. Who will be the caring person? I can question it. What are my options if I am injured during the study? Of course, if anything happens or if any injury is there, how will I be specified or taken care? So these are the questions very specific to the clinical trial and thereby for the smooth conduct of the clinical research. This is about the type of the clinical research and its application and the research related problems. See you all in another video related to the clinical research. Stay tuned to channel Shamina Surfuddin. Thank you.